Either of you asked to do Strictly?
No, I mean, after your brilliant performance, Ed, I don't think any of us can live up to those standards. So,
would you do it if they asked, Kwasi?
I'm not sure. I've been asked a couple of things. The one thing I won't do...
Have you been asked to... Oh,
no,
right.
Bake Off. Bake Off I can't do.
Why not?
Because I'm not very good at baking.
OK.
And,
that's part of the fun.
Well, hang on a sec. I mean, I think not being very good at it is part of the...
That's part of the plan. So I haven't done that, but I haven't really looked into many of these other shows.
OK, so you said you were asked to do Bake Off, but there was a couple of things. So what was
I'm not going to go into the... I think...
Oh, come on.
There was...
You're amongst friends here.
I think there was an SAS... I can't
Who
remember
did?
that one. I think
Yes.
because Matt Hancock did it.
Oh, right.
So I remember that. And I think that was it.
I'm a celebrity, get me out of here.
No, I haven't
I'm a former Chancellor, get me out of here.
Well, there's the one also, the Manhunt. Is there a Manhunt?
Yes.
That one, I think.
Hunted, Celebrity
That's
Hunted,
right.
yeah.
And Johnny Mercer did that.
Right.
So, and that was, I can't remember, there was a clash or there was something.
So you've watched all these programmes, seen your former colleagues in them and gone, no way, I'm not doing those.
Exactly right.
You're going to
exactly
stick to Good Morning Britain.
Well, I like commenting on the news, on policy, on politics. I find that very interesting, and that's something that I enjoy doing.
I don't know if you saw Carol Vorderman's interview this
no,
week.
Oh, I did. In the paper.
Right, well, she did a speech at the Edinburgh Festival.
Yeah.
Where she said that you, as former Chancellor who crashed the economy, should not be on our programme.
Ever. You should, yeah, that's right. But I wouldn't make a personal comment about her. But I think that people should have a right to discuss ideas. And I think the idea that you just cancel someone because of what they've done in the past, I think is wrong.
Yeah.
It's not criminal.
And Aisha, you obviously don't agree with Carol because you're happily here alongside the former Chancellor, and it is important.
We've actually spent quite a lot of time together.
Really?
We
Deny.
We did. I mean, controversially, we spent the night together. We watched the debate. We watched the debate together with Kamala Harris and Donald Trump.
That's
right. Right. Okay, so before we get to anything else...
When you say you watched it with Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, you weren't with them.
No, we were watching them.
Just tell us about that, because obviously that is reverberating. The American debate, the fact that Donald Trump thinks there are immigrants getting into Springfield, Ohio, kidnapping pets and eating them. Was that the maddest moment of the debate?
Well, I mean, he also spread another terrible piece of misinformation saying that people were executing babies after they were born in terms of abortion. And look, Kwasi and I come from very, very different politics, and we have many, many a clash. However, we were both aghast at those particular moments.
We both reached the same conclusion. I think Kamala Harris basically won the debate on points. I don't think it was a knockout, but she had to prove that she could do the job. And also, people didn't know who she was. Everyone knows who Trump is. I mean, you have to have lived under a rock not to know who Donald Trump is. But there was a big question mark about her, and I think she passed the test in the sense that people could see her.
But I think what was really interesting about that sort of debate, look, and Ed and I will know this, having, worked in politics a long time and, coached people for these sort of big debates, the pressure on her was absolutely huge. She went into that really being the underdog. People didn't know who she was. She's had a lot of criticism for not doing many media interviews and not being quite upfront. He, for whatever you think about him, can be a very, very skilled communicator. He's very good at sort of landing big messages.
Simple points,
But what I thought was really interesting about her, and I think she delivered brilliantly, she was so well prepared. She landed all her big lines. She really got under his skin. Like, the bit that I think really turned the debate is when she goaded him about his rallies, and he'd obviously been quite coached. And when he went up against Biden, that amazing kind of box office, game-changing debate, he was quite restrained and he kind of stuck to, Biden looked like the one who was all over the place.
He let Biden flounder,
She knew how to press his emotional pin numbers, and he just lost it. He looked incoherent, he looked rambling, he looked just bizarre at times. I thought she did a brilliant job.
I want to just bring the focus then back to domestic politics here, because that's obviously what people are hugely concerned about. What do you make of Sir Keir Starmer's performance? Particularly, we had PMQs, of course, yesterday. It's very interesting. Rishi Sunak asked Sir Keir Starmer a question which I put to the Labour Minister yesterday on the programme, which is, if back in 2017 Labour did this analysis of withdrawing the winter fuel allowance and decided that it was a terrible idea that the Tories were suggesting because it could lead to the deaths of 4,000 pensioners. Where's the new analysis, which means that now it's absolutely fine for the Labour
Well, you'd have to
do
ask them. I mean, I'm not privy to any of that sort of information. But clearly what's happened is they've done the deal with the unions in terms of putting up their pay, inflation busting, much higher than that.
It was the independent pay review body's recommendation.
OK, but then they've got to...
would have...
But then they've got to find the money to fill that gap. And it's a political choice, and we've discussed this before. They've decided, rather oddly, in my view, to go after this winter fuel payment. And as you said, Ed, last week, we've been discussing this for a decade, at least, probably more, actually. And there are ways that they could have mitigated what they're doing, but they've chosen not to. And I think this could be a defining moment in the government.
Let's have a listen to that moment in PMQs yesterday.
Will he now publish the impact assessment before the House rises? So I ask, very simply again, why won't he publish the assessment now? The Labour Party's own previous analysis claimed that this policy could cause 3,850 deaths. So are the numbers in his impact assessment higher or lower than that? Today, pensioners watching will have seen that the Prime Minister has repeatedly refused to admit or to publish the consequences of his decision.
Aisha, do you think there is an impact assessment?
Well, I would imagine there is an impact assessment. This is really, really difficult for the Labour Party, and I think everybody across the party is quite shocked at this. However, this is the really difficult bit about governing that is about to begin. And I think what's really interesting is that in opposition, there was a lot to criticise the last government about. But now Labour is in charge. And I think, to be fair to the Labour Party, they have inherited an absolutely horrendous set of circumstances. If you just look at what's happening...
Well, we're the fastest growing country in the G7.
Kwasi, let me finish. If you look across every strata in society right now, whether it's the health service, whether it's prisons, you know, where we've just had the outgoing Justice Secretary talking about just how precarious things got in terms of the criminal justice system, this country has been really, really broken. Now, Labour has got to try and fix it, but it is not easy. You know, nobody feels good about this decision and what lies ahead. You know, I'll be absolutely honest with you. Labour people are really, really nervous about what's going to come out in this budget and they're really nervous that things will get worse before they get better. But I will just say, in terms of looking, that we've got this report from Lord Darcy coming about the health service. When you look at how hollowed out such big parts of our society have been over the last 14 years, from the health service, the criminal justice service. Look, we're talking about old people. By the way, I'm, deeply saddened about this, what's happening now and what lies ahead. But let's say we're talking about older people. Let's look at the cuts to local government, for example, which, by the way, provides social care and funds social care and services like Meals on Wheels for older people. So there's a lot of really hard decisions that are lying ahead, which no one's happy about.
We knew the state of the NHS was bad. We knew that the local government's funding was bad. I think it is right to say that Rachel Reeves was shocked to find out that there were things they weren't expecting. For example, the costs of what was happening in the Home Office. And we know the prison's position was much, much more serious. The thing which I think people are struggling with is why Labour would decide that the first decision was to hit middle and low-income pensioners. That is where the politics is hard to understand. Why would you start there?
Oh, Ed, I completely agree with you. I mean, I think everybody is really dismayed about this because particularly one of the things that the last Labour government did was really help pensioners and discuss fuel poverty. So the politics of this is really, really difficult.
I wonder... I know. OK, Kwasi, I wonder...
Thank you.
...whether it's deliberate. So basically, the government says, we're going to take away the winter fuel allowance from anyone who's not on pension credit. And pretty much everyone says, that's terrible, you can't do that. But they know they can get it through because of their majority. Because then, in the budget, they can put up taxes. And no one can complain when they put up taxes because they can say, well, you didn't like what we did to the pensioners, so we had to do this.
So that might be part of their strategy. But overall, coming into government, what they will be hoping is that if they get all the difficult decisions done early, by the time you get to the midterm, the political debate will have moved on and they will reap the benefits from the tough decisions that they made at the beginning of the Parliament. I think that's part of their calculation. Yeah. The problem with that is that, as the Lib Dems found with tuition fees, it can just define you for the whole Parliament. Yeah. By the end of 2010, they'd voted for tuition fees, and that killed them. If you looked at the polls, they were on about 10% for 4 years, and they got pretty much wiped out.
And sometimes it is one issue. I mean, like with Margaret Thatcher and the poll tax. It's just one lingering issue.
That's the danger. I'm not saying it's going to happen. That's the danger.
Although, just for a bit of historical perspective, governments do have to take very difficult decisions. When Tony Blair first came in, there was a very controversial cut to loan parents and benefits. The rebellion was actually bigger than, I think it was 100 abstentions, and it was about 48, 49 MPs voted against. In this, you've got one MP voting, and that majority was pretty similar. Now, I think we'll have to see... Look, this is not even about whether I'm comfortable with it or we're comfortable with it. Time is going to tell with this, and I think the Labour Party is going to have to do a lot of work monitoring what's happening with people.
And also, if there is analysis of how pensioners are going to be impacted, it needs to be released. I asked the Minister yesterday. We didn't know what it was. Rishi Sunak asked the Prime Minister in the House of Commons. But we don't know what it is.
That is important, and I really hope that information's come. But I just do say, Kwasi, it is very well kind of lecturing people on the economy, but the mini-budget that you're involved in...
Yeah, you've made that point many times. I accept that.
But it's not just a throwaway thing, and I'm accepting that this is really, really difficult and really uncomfortable. But the mini-budget saw people's mortgages, like, triple in some cases. So that these things are very, very, very difficult, and I think the Labour Party is fully aware of how hard this is.
So
but we did inherit an absolute mess from the Conservatives.
The issue now is the Labour Party is now in government. They are now owning these issues. And it is a legitimate question to ask, why did they come after winter fuel payments within 2 months? And I think the only explanation is that they think they can get the tough decisions at the beginning and hope that somehow
they will be able
to get through.
This would also be an unpopular decision if you got rid of the single-person discount when it comes to council tax. Let's have a listen to the Prime Minister being quizzed about that at PMQs.
Will the Prime Minister today rule out scrapping concessionary travel fares and council tax discounts, which also help millions of pensioners across the UK? Yes or no?
Prime Minister. Well, as he knows very well, I'm not going to preempt the budget. It will all be set out in due course.
The problem here is not that answer from the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister will always say in the House of Commons, look, I'm not going to come on the budget. When they then, what happens in Prime Minister's questions, at the end of the half hour, then all the journalists rush out of the chamber into a little area behind the Speaker's chair, and the Prime Minister's spokesman comes out and talks to them. Same thing happens after budgets. And in that huddle, it's called, the Prime Minister's spokesman, according to Reza James, our political correspondent, said we aren't going after free TV licences or free bus, but then wouldn't be drawn on this single person's council tax benefit. What that does is that sort of that inconsistency or that differentiation gives legs to this story. And, you know, the reality is that for single parents just above the pension credit threshold, that council tax discount will be an important part of their budgeting. So it feels like another thing this week where the government is sort of slightly feeding people's concerns.
But Ed, you know this better than anyone. There is going to be fevered speculation between now and the budget, right? There always is. But this budget, I can't remember a more hotly anticipated budget, and a budget that everybody is, quite frankly, worried about on many levels. But I just think we, in a way, what this government has done, which is actually quite unusual, and look, it's very, very difficult, they aren't selling. They've decided to go in with, I mean, no kind of false promises, no false hope, just a very, very stern message about how difficult things are going to be. And I know how difficult that is. I mean, when we were watching the Kamala Harris-Donald Trump debate the other night, I was kind of thinking, you know, she had a lot of hope in her message.
Yeah. Whereas he's Sakir Gloomer.
That's right.
Yeah, but he's also got to be honest. Look, we've got a situation. We've had prisoners. We've got hardly any prison places left.
Yeah.
The Rwanda scheme cost huge amounts of money. We had so much money being wasted. We have inherited a very different.
But it's about the priorities.
You can say
however
choices
hard.
you make.
It is the choices.
You can say however hard.
But
You know, you've had the conch for quite a while, but
the conch, Lord of the Flies.
You were there for quite a long time.
No, that's true. But look, it's about the choices.
Actually, it quasi didn't have for very long. His time as Chancellor was pretty short.
But it was lasting. He made a big impact.
So look, I think that it's about the choices they've made. And they didn't campaign on any of this, which is their right, but they didn't say, we're going to come in, we're going to do a deal with the unions that's inflation busting, we're going to take away winter fuel payments. But they must have had a plan for it because they did it within a couple of months. And that's what governments do. But it's the choices they've made with prisons, with regard to winter fuel, with the riots. All of these things.
Can I ask about the NHS?
The riots
hang on, Kwasi. What choice did they make on prisons? What choice did they make on prisons?
They let people out. They didn't have to do that. They didn't have to do that.
They absolutely
did not have to do that. They did not have to do that.
That's just so not true.
There was a scheme.
What were they supposed to do?
There was a scheme where they were going to export or take prisoners into third countries. That was something that was suggested, and clearly they were thinking about it.
Your own former Justice Secretary has said that they were basically on their knees praying about how bad the situation was.
Rishi Sunak was being asked to do this, and he refused in the election campaign, which is understandable, maybe an election campaign. The reality was there was no choice, because it would have been impossible to put any of the people who were arrested in the riots into prison, and the prisons were full. That was a catastrophe.
It was a policy choice to let them out in this way. And a policy choice to let out the people that they did let out.
I'm not sure what the choice is. A choice means there's a choice of alternatives. What's the alternative?
The alternative would have been, for example, to put them into a third country. That could have been an alternative.
What, like Rwanda?
No,
because that went really well.
There was all sorts of...
Well, I think the Justice Secretary herself has said at some point she's going to have to consider budget hotels, so the choice could have been alternative accommodation other than
there are
prisons.
always policy choices. You know that in government. There are always different policy
Can I ask about that, Aisha? Sorry,
on the prison stuff, I'm sorry, the idea that you're trying to pass the absolute horlicks that the prison service has left onto this, which we've been apart for like 10 weeks. I think a bit of perspective is needed.
So I agree. I think there were things that the previous government did.
But each of these things is a choice.
But there are choices to deal with the problems. That's what I'm saying.
And how you deal with them is a choice.
Yeah. Can we talk about the NHS?
Yeah, sure.
A huge report. NHS is an absolutely mammoth issue for every government.
That's right.
Kwasi, how do we make the NHS better?
So I disagree with what Ed said in the earlier part of the programme, where essentially, as I heard you said that money was the key factor. And I think...
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a factor. It's a factor.
Other things are important too.
Because you can put inputs, but it's the outputs. It's the actual output, the result of the treatment, the care. That's what people should be judged on. The fact is, we've been putting tons of money into the NHS.
That's not true.
No, we flatlined between 2010 and 2015, but when Theresa May came in 2016, she actually gave a massive increase into NHS spending on the 70th anniversary of the NHS in 2018.
It was massive on your terms, but actually, in historical terms, it wasn't massive at all.
It was much bigger than what had gone on before, which you acknowledge. And as a consequence...
After 2010, absolutely.
And then after COVID, we put in a huge amount of more money.
Well, there was a pandemic.
But the actual results that we've seen...
The Darzi review says...
haven't got better.
The Darzi review says there is gross underfunding of the health service. The buildings are decaying, there's not enough staff, there's not enough equipment, and that is the problem.
Aisha, what would you do?
Well, I think money is really important. I think staff retention and recruitment is really important. And this idea we keep hearing about demonising public sector workers, we need those workers in our NHS and, by the way, in our schools and in other parts across the realm. The other thing which I think is really important is this capital investment in equipment, in buildings. You know, some of our hospitals are sort of Victorian. And the other thing which is really important is prevention. We don't have a national health service. We have a national sickness service at the moment.
Let's get healthier ourselves. All right, Kwasi, Aisha, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good to see you this morning.